Hello. Been wanting to talk to you for a long time, but this computer here was not functioning for a while. But since it's fixed, I can now talk to you about how I've been writing a book for a while. 13 years to be exact. So the purpose of this conversation is I want to tell you all the things that I've learned over the past 13 years, and basically I want to help you not get stuck trying to tell a simple story within 13 years. You should be able to pull this off in 2 or less. So details on this: I started this when I went to Snow College back in October 2011, and years went by. You would write a bit. 3 years I wrote it to like page 120 and then deleted back. So stuff like that will happen. That kind of delays you. Over the summers I would be like, I'm going to edit and write. And then I would landscape and work 10, 12 hours in 100-degree weather and just not have it in me to do any writing whatsoever. And of course, life's going to get in the way. You're going to get busy with school or work. You just really got to learn to time manage. So today I actually took work off specifically so I could edit my book. I wrote a whole new chapter in like 4 hours, whatever. So you do need to time manage, but we'll get more into that. But some of my struggles have been the education side of writing. In high school I took creative writing. Didn't really help. And then in college I took creative writing. Did not help. And you learn the basics, where they teach the hero's journey. You can reflect that on Star Wars with Luke Skywalker. And that story's kind of retold over and over, but they don't get deep enough. They can tell you certain things that they want, but they don't actually help you be a better writer for some reason. So they're, even at the college level, way to open your mind and be free and write whatever comes to you. But that actually creates garbage writing. So once you learn how to actually write and what is necessary. I was even taught this is actually a good thing to be taught, that art is the elimination of the unnecessary. And that is so true in your storytelling. So my number one recommendation of all this is to get an editor, but we'll get back to that. But as you write your story, even before you find an editor, when I found an editor, I asked him, what resources can you give me to help me be a better writer? And he gave me 2 books. These 2 books changed everything for me. And I don't know why they were not recommended in college. This is something, if you're going to take a creative writing class, college should just present it to you. We have Save the Cat Writes a Novel. And this is based off Save the Cat Writes a Screenplay, where in the 90s they kind of figured out the perfect formula to make a movie, how to tell a story. But it's not just one story. It's not just a hero's journey over and over. You have different genres are in here. So if you want to write a horror story, this tells you how to write a horror story. If you want to write a romance novel, this teaches you how to write a romance novel. What's great about it is it has roadmaps to all of those. So really you just need to figure out, okay, what's the general idea that I need to get out, and what chapters do I need to write to get the points across to where I'm telling a good story. And I think that is much better than aimlessly trying to write and create something. I think the first 5 years of me trying to write the book, I was just very aimless. I had my storyboard and the plots, but they weren't very strong. And it was just, I drew images. I was like, all right, here's where they fight the werewolves. And then he comes over here and he's fighting the vampires. And this is where a car crash happens, something dumb like that, Whereas this will help you map out, at this percentage in the story, this needs to happen to this character to help you get deeper than just events happening. You have to tie those events to character growth and plot pushing. So Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Number 2, first 5 pages. This will go through, this is cool because this is like an exercise book, which is why it should even be in colleges more. It's going to walk you through rereading your first 5 pages of your book over and over and over while tweaking and editing it, because if it has a single flaw in it and you send it to the printers or publishers, they will reject it when they find those flaws. An example is you don't want to use words that end in ly, so He ran frantically to his neighbor's house. We don't need the word frantically. He ran to his neighbor's house. It also recommends removing more than needed descriptions. The exact one it gives in here is, he stepped out of the car into the hot, dry, dusty, hot desert. We don't need all those. Like, let's pick a description and go with it. He stepped out into the hot desert. Done. We can imagine the rest of the desert. And that was an issue that I had a lot in my book, is I was very descriptive. I actually had people telling me, I like your book because it's very descriptive. They don't want descriptive, actually. They want very clear, concise, on-point descriptions, but not over-the-top descriptions. Which brings me to my next point, and I gotta be kind of careful here. I'm very appreciative of all the friends and family who have looked at this, but they're not really going to help you. Unless you have somebody in your family or friend group that is absolutely professionally involved in editing or book publishing, the best you can do with your family is kind of make them a beta reader, but you don't want them to edit or give their opinion or thought. They're not trained enough to know what to do. And so before you even get to family and friends, just straight up find an editor. That is the best thing you can do next, is finding that editor that knows exactly what they're doing and talking about. So a lot of people complain about my grammar. I have very bad grammar, but it's getting better. So when I took it to the editor, I was like, hey, I just need you to fix the grammar and we'll get published, because I had a book. And then he met with me and he was like, hey, I see what you mean, but after reviewing, I think it's best you do developmental editing. And that went completely over my head. Like, I was like, I don't know what developmental editing is. I have no idea what you're talking about. And I could not comprehend it. We sat there for like 45 minutes and he just was like, well, it's like kind of like character growth. And I was like, there's character growth? And he's like, no, your book doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. He just shredded it and it was good. It was good. You want someone that can shred your book. That's the issue. Family and friends can't really shred it. They can say stuff like, oh, this part was dumb, this part was cool. But they don't know how to tell you how to restructure it to where it developmentally makes sense. And there are actually different editors out there that not only like a developmental or versus a copy editor. What I'm talking about is genre editors as well. There are people who will advertise themselves as, hey, I like to read fantasy and I will edit your fantasy novel. There are people that are like, I'm strictly sci-fi and I want to edit your sci-fi book. There's people that are like, I will only edit romance and nothing else. So try to find those people. The editor that I went with, he was still in school. I think he only had like a semester left though, but so he was willing to do anything and he did fantastic regardless. But just so you know, like you don't want someone who makes romance movies for a living direct the next Star Wars, because that turned out to be absolute garbage. So going with that, over the years, as I've passed my book around to random readers, I've gotten some pretty bad feedback. One of my friends gave him the book, and then like 6 months later, he's like, oh, I finally read like half of it. And his only feedback was, you should change the main character's name. And I have no idea why that just stuck with him. Out of everything he read, it was, you should change the character's name. That's not what you're looking for as a writer. Like, you don't give a crap. This is your character. You're going to name him what you name him, and that's what it's going to be. You're not going to change the name because somebody's like, I think the name should be there. Even worse than that, I had one of my cousins, I think she was like 13 or 14 at the time, her friend was like, I want to read that. That sounds interesting. So we let her read it. And her feedback was, remember this, Angels of the Fallen. Angels. Okay. You don't know what her feedback was? I like the story, but I don't really care about the angels. I think you should just make it about the humans. That was her feedback. Could you imagine going into a donut shop and be like, I like donuts, but could you imagine if this place was only burgers and fries? It was just garbage feedback. So don't waste your time handing your book to people that just don't know what you need, don't know what you're looking for. Even then, I would hand my book out and be like, look, I just want you to tell me, do the chapters make sense? Does the book make sense? Do you get the vibe I'm going for? I'm going for a very creepy, ominous, haunting. You're walking down this spooky old mountain road as it's slightly rainy. You think there's something creeping up on you. But, I'd say, like, tell me that. And then they would always be like, oh, you had a spelling error on this page. Oh, I found a place where you forgot to capitalize this word. Hey, you need a comma here. I'm just like, I'm not looking for that. Stop copy editing my book. read it as fast as you can, give me the info back that I am looking for. So that is why you need an editor, so they can do that. Don't waste months and years on people that don't know what they're doing. Give it to an editor. That being said, again, I highly appreciated everybody who did take their time, read my stuff, gave it all sorts of feedback. Still appreciated. I did it in the wrong order. It's on me. I'm the bad guy in the story because what you should do is get this to the editor and then have them do certain types of editing. And of course, you should do your developmental editing first because you're going to change a lot. You're going to shift things. Like that's besides from the developmental editing, just prepared. You will be rewriting, you will be cutting, you will be recreating, destroying until it all fits. It's things fall in place. It doesn't come together in a smooth, perfect. It's nasty. It's you have to butcher the cow before you get that delicious steak. So a good order you should go in is learn how to write a plot, a book, developmentally as well, and make sure you start out good, because I basically was writing my book as if I was watching a movie in my head. So it'd be like, this happened, that happened, then this happened, then that happened. And it tells a story, but it only gives the image of the story. There's no depth, and that was my problem. That's why I needed developmental editing to where, we went deeper. It became, I had to learn the difference between a movie and an actual book. This is a movie. I'm currently trying to write an actual book. Also, make sure you have good grammar, yada yada, so that when you write, send it to your editor, it's kind of already done, or you know what to look for, and just to make it go smoother and faster for you. So you're not re-editing so much. But you will have to re-edit after it gets to your first round of editors, so be prepared for that. It doesn't make sense to try to copy line edit first, so get the developmental stuff done and then do your line editing so it's more solid. You're not wasting time and repeating. So I guess to give some examples of why or how this is a movie and not a book, we're never inside of any characters' heads in this copy. Not really, not very well. And the issue is I have two characters in here. I have the angel and I have the child he's supposed to protect. But I bounce back and forth between their brains and it doesn't really work. Especially if your characters are in the same room, or like in this one, they're in a car a lot, driving around from like graveyards to haunted forest, whatever. And you can't, one perspective is all you need, and it needs to be loud and clear and kind of like, you want to be in your character's head to make it closer to them and understand what they're thinking, and they'll walk you through the story instead of being like images of what's happening. You're being walked through a main character's head, and you get closer and you relate more to the character. That was one of the biggest issues I had. The other issue, my chapters are cool. It's the angel fights vampires, the angel fights a werewolf, the angel fights another angel. You have all this crazy stuff going on, but those chapters are just cool little stories, but they weren't progressing my main character. And so you have to really focus, like, what does this chapter do for this character? I'm about to insult and offend a lot of people, and I don't care. Lord of the Rings, I listened to the audio the other day. I got halfway through the book-wise, which is where, I don't even know what the city is, but it's where the fellowship comes together, and they're like, what do we do with this ring? And, you have my axe and my bow, all that stuff. That's where I got to in the audio. But I realized Lord of the Rings is editorially atrocious. It's garbage. You have so much information in there that we don't need to know, and a lot of these geeks and nerds, I myself a geek and nerd, I'm not trying to be offensive here, will throw fits about, oh, it's so cool that we have all this info. Oh, it's so great that we know the deep cultures of the hobbits. It's like, it doesn't, it might be world immersive, but it's not good, important info that moves the story forward nor character growth forward. So Tom Bombadil, everybody complains about Tom Bombadil. He should have been in the movie. He's useless. He does nothing. The hobbits go wandering through the woods, something happens and he frees them and they go, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't change how Sam acts. It doesn't change Frodo. It does nothing. So props to Peter Jackson for knowing how to tell a better story. But with my book, the issue was kind of, what was the point of this chapter? You know, I would tell it like a movie, like, here's what happened, and then the editor was like, I get what happened, but why did it happen? Is this necessary? Did it need to happen? We need your character to tell us why this is important, or you need to tell us or show us how this chapter improves the plot and or the character's growth and moving this forward. If it doesn't move it forward, if it has nothing to do with it, you got to cut it. And so what we started doing was, when this angel falls, he has no powers, but he learns abilities as he moves forward, which is good, but then we had to go even deeper. Like, how does this emotionally affect your character? How does this spiritually, mentally change how they view the world? How does it shift their reality? That's what we need. You know, how do we progress them forward from just, oh, I'm more powerful now and I killed a monster, to, hey, I'm reflecting here and now I need to move forward. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what you got to do with your chapters. They have to have a meaning behind them. And Frodo and Sam wandering in the woods, there's no meaning behind it. And I could probably go too much into details on that. You know, quick examples. I rewrote a chapter where he fails to kill a monster, and then he has to reflect at the end, oh my gosh, that monster almost killed me. And if I'm dead, we're all dead. You know, so he starts becoming more cautious. I have chapters where, you know, originally it used to be like there was a recap chapter that was like, after he hunted all these monsters, he gained all this power. And that was kind of silly. So we wrote it to where we kind of broke it up into 3 chapters, and each chapter, as he hunted and killed a monster, he learned a new ability. So this new one I wrote today, he learns telekinetic power to where he can grab an object without touching it and bring it towards him, you know, kind of like using the Force, whatever. But yeah, aside from that, we'll move on to the next thing. That next thing being, you need to re-reference a lot throughout your book. I kept just moving forward. My editor was like, you've gone 8 chapters without mentioning the human in the story. You know, the whole purpose of the angel's journey was to find this human. He says it's the most important thing to him, and then he disappears for 8 chapters. That doesn't make sense. So now, as I rewrite, every single chapter, I have to revisit. Human is important. This main character, human, we need to find him. We need to save him. This is important. Instead of putting it on the back burner. And there are other things that happen in this book that are subplots. You need to revisit those. You got to keep telling the reader, again, why is this happening? What's happening? You know, just revisit. So, your start of your chapter should, you know, be like, we're headed this direction, but this is why. Because in the last chapter, this happened, and so now we have to go to this direction. You kind of got to remind them, this is what is happening. So I always bring up, he used the technical powers that he learned while he killed the ghost to blah, 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 blah. Just so they kind of, oh yeah, I remember that. And not only should you start your chapters with kind of a slight recap. It's not like an obvious recap. It's like, this is what happened previously. Like, no, it's like, this is where we're going, and it's because of this. And you just do that in like 2-3 quick sentences. And then the end of your chapters, I think this Save the Cat even tells you, maybe it's even this one, you end your chapter on cliffhangers, but they don't have to be intense cliffhangers. Like, it's not always like, whoa, what's going to happen? You know, if you constantly have that mind-blowing effect, it's not going to be mind-blowing by the end of the book. So, you know, I think the start of your chapters, and this will help you figure out how intense your cliffhangers need to be at the end of each chapter. You know, in a certain percentage of the book, it needs to be an intense cliffhanger. At other times, it's not so much a cliffhanger so much as a question of like, what is going to happen next versus, oh my gosh, are they going to stay alive? So it's kind of like a beginning recap of, we're going this direction because this is what happened previously, and at the end, it's another recap of, this is what happened this chapter, and we're going to reflect on this chapter, and we can give you a little hint, foreshadow what's happening in the next chapter, and that'll help keep the cycle of engagement and the importance of the chapter, and letting the reader remember and understand why it's important and what is happening. Don't lose your reader. Don't make it, you know, you can take complicated books, but you just have to cross-reference itself a lot to where the reader's tracking what's going on. So maybe in future videos I'll go more into the details of some of these things I've tried to tell you, but I think I've narrowed it down to 3 things. 1, before you even start, learn how to tell a proper story. And then 2, once said story is there, get a proper editor. And then 3, I want you to manage your time. Part of that time management is your editors usually only edit 4 pages a day. And that's, even academically, we were told by our professors, you should only write 4 pages a day, because anything past that, it's not going to be quality enough. But you could easily, as a writer, bust out 20 pages. And then don't waste time mishandling the managing of your book. Try to do it in a meticulous order to where you're saving time. Because if you're going to send it to your editor and you have other book ideas in your head, like I've got like 6 books where I've written like page 50 to page 100. I've got the whole sequel to this plotted out. So while your editor is working on that, you should be writing your next book. And then you get the feedback, and you say, okay, and then you go back and you fix things to where your editor thinks it should be. And then you send it back out to your beta readers. And with your beta readers, there's actually podcasts, the Editor's Podcast. You should listen to Editor's Podcast. They mentioned they have an episode where it breaks down questions that you should have for each chapter or section of your book that you want your beta reader to fill out and make sure your book is on par with your average reader. So while they're reading it, again, you can work on your next book. This is how writers bust out, 10 books in their lifetime, is they're managing the time. They're not just sitting on the one book. So once this book is back on track and going through its processes, I will, taking what I've learned that I've now shared with you, go through and hopefully bust out more storytelling. So let me know how this was, if it was helpful or not, what more you want to hear. Thanks. Lastly, I want to mention, it is so cool to hold a physical, actual copy of your book. I got this from Lulu, I believe. I think it was just called lulu.com, whatever. And it has like a PDF file, so you can design the back of your book and whatnot, and then you tell it how you want to. I think you upload a PDF, and it wasn't too much. I think it was only like $7 to $15 per book. So it's cool. I have like 5 of these, but this is a garbage copy because this is unedited by an editor. But please don't give up. Don't listen to the internet. I know the internet will say stuff like, oh, you're never going to get published. Doesn't matter. If I could have all 6 of these books on my shelf, I think that's cool. So good luck and good writing.